Well, last time didn't go that well. I was so exhausted. I realized only when I got home that I only answered half of the questions. So I went back to the questions, and sometimes there were 2 or 3. I just answered the first part. Now I want to go back to some of the arguments, some of the comments, not everything, but I think it's quite helpful. This is also part of the way that you study in the Tibetan tradition. You don't just learn from the person teaching you, or, well, the person, in my case, you would call it lab lab, just discussing things with you. It's not like a teaching, it's like a lab lab, just discussing things. Oops, I better silence this, sorry. But you also learn from those discussing things in class. Any kind of question, we're encouraged to listen well and try to answer it ourselves, and of course to debate. Now, as to a debate that was presented here that I totally ignored, it comes from Bernd. Remember, we had this whole discussion about whether, if taking a life is a non-virtue, is giving a life virtuous? Is giving life with the motivation, of course, to provide a reasonable life with reasonable education, reasonable affluence, without, dying of hunger and thirst. So being able to raise a child responsibly with that wish you would like to give life, is that a virtue or not? So his argument here is that, first of all, that's not really the opposite of taking a life. Giving a life is not the opposite of taking a life. Because taking life is in the list of the 10 non-virtuous actions. Taking a life is part of the 10 non-virtuous actions. Oh my God, I forgot the prayers. I'm so spaced out still. I didn't even take my iPad out. I'm still totally spaced out. Gosh, apologies. I thought it was much better today. What did I do? All right. Sorry for that. Okay. Reminding you of generating the right kind of motivation. I'm totally practicing that. Okay. So let's first start, of course, with the prayers. In order to generate the most effective motivation to take in all that we discussed today. Oh yeah, here we go. Until I reach enlightenment, I take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By accumulating merit and wisdom through generosity and the other perfections, may I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. Until I reach enlightenment, I take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By accumulating merit and wisdom through generosity and the other perfections, may I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. Until I reach enlightenment, I take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By accumulating merit and wisdom through generosity and the other perfections, may I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings never be separated from the happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment and anger that holds some close and others distant. I pay homage to the Sublime Mother of the victorious ones of the 3 times, the inexpressible, inconceivable, and indescribable perfection of wisdom, which is unborn, unceasing, and of the nature of space, and which is the object of realization of the self-knowing primordial wisdom. Okay. Anyway, so he's saying it's not the opposite, giving a life, because giving birth is not in the list of virtuous opposite actions. Or is it? So in this aspect, it's not seen as the opposite. What is the virtues? And when we talk about the 10 non-virtues, for instance, taking a life, or, well, literally, instead of stealing, it says taking something that has not been given. That's how it's put. But of course, we need to specify what that actually means. Okay, what is the opposite of killing? No. No.
Saving.
No, it's not saving a life.
Killing, not killing a life.
They're not killing. Refraining from killing.
Okay.
Right? I mean, yeah, I'm hearing it, yeah, like the opposite would be saving a life. It kind of makes sense. But actually, when the 10 virtues are described, it doesn't say saving a life. Engage, look out. Anyone, all of you, save a life today. So actually, the 10 virtues we should engage in at all times. So like, that's going to be really difficult to find someone to be saved. So it's really just refraining from killing, refraining from stealing, refraining from sexual misconduct, and so on. That's the opposite, which is why it's no problem. But I like that, you know, the arguments. He's got a few points here saying, well, it's not the opposite because it's not mentioned in the 10 virtues. It doesn't have to be mentioned here, just to be an opposite. Refraining from killing is the direct opposite, but being an opposite and being a direct opposite are not the same thing. Remember last time we talked about it and I got distracted and I never completed my thought. But for instance, saying being tall and being short, these are considered opposites, right? But they're not direct opposites. A direct opposite would mean, for instance, that someone who's not tall must be short. So what's the direct opposite of tall? Not tall. Or what is the direct opposite of killing? Not killing. We had that discussion slightly last time. It's part of Buddhist logic. It takes some getting used to, but yeah, so the idea of opposites versus direct opposites, where whatever exists must be one of the two, permanent and impermanent. Whatever exists is either permanent or impermanent. Those two are direct opposites. Okay. Then his second argument, so they're not, just because they're not opposites doesn't mean it cannot be a virtuous action. Isn't taking, so my argument would be giving a life with the kind of motivation I described, just because it's not considered to be one of the 10 virtues, doesn't mean it's not a virtue. Then isn't taking birth in samsara one of the sufferings? And in this the same as death, so no opposites in this respect. Well, then giving and taking something as a samsaric being is also not an opposite, right? Giving something or refraining from killing. And killing would not be opposites because the person refraining from it is a samsaric person. It's both a samsaric action, a virtuous samsaric action versus a non-virtuous samsaric actions, but samsaric nevertheless. Unfortunately, all our virtuous actions at this point are what I call contaminated. Remember, we discussed the whole thing about like contaminated actions. So the only uncontaminated action that we engage in is the direct realization of emptiness. If we have attained, if we have realized emptiness first conceptually and then realize it directly, that is a direct antidote to our misconception of reality. Without that, our actions are all influenced by our misconceptions. I mean, let's face it, even our Dharma practice is affected, is influenced by our self-grasping mind. And that may sound disturbing because it's like, oh my God, we're just reinforcing that type of mind. But we're not reinforcing it, we're weakening it, but we're still using what we have. And I gave you the example some month ago of, for instance, when you do yoga, you have a stiff body. You used to transform your body into a flexible, into a pliant body. You don't get a super body to then use in order to, train in yoga. No, you've got a stiff body and that is slowly transformed. Likewise, we have a mind that is affected by our afflictions. We utilize that in order then to overcome the afflictions. Same idea. So, therefore, all our actions are contaminated at this point. That's okay. But we're replacing non-virtuous actions with as many positive actions, virtuous actions as possible. And as Nagarjuna, for instance, says, we're actually using the spear of the self-centered mind to pierce the self-centered mind. We utilize our self-centeredness, we utilize our self-cherishing, initially by accumulating virtuous karma and so forth, by being told, well, if you generate compassion, you feel better. Okay, I do it for that reason. For altruistic reasons? No, sorry. Mainly, I'm working with my self-centered mind, but then through the practice of compassion, more and more, it will naturally weaken. So then it'll eventually, this self-centered mind, because of that self-centered mind, I engaged in Dharma practice. And I'm able to thereby overcome that self-centered mind. Okay, so then he says, with respect to the scope, the time scope, giving birth and taking life are totally different. So they happen at different times. Well, not necessarily. You can give a life and then have an abortion. So that would be like, sorry for that sounds pretty cruel, but basically, yes, it doesn't have to be at totally different times. And similarly, giving someone something, feeding them is seen as a virtue, taking away their food, stealing their food, for instance, as a non-virtue, but that can also happen at different times. And if giving birth would be virtuous, should this be directly mentioned in the sutras? Well, maybe it's mentioned in the sutras, but I don't think all the sutras made it up to this point. To believe that all the sutras, all the teachings the Buddha has given that were written down were preserved, I don't think that happened. Think the Buddha taught from the age of what, like 35, 36, up to the age of 80? And if you'd written down, like he was teaching constantly, all these volumes of teachings, they wouldn't fit into a house. Now, of course, there are different sutras that were preserved in the different traditions, in the Theravada tradition, the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, and so forth. So, yeah, anyway, we don't know if the Buddha didn't say it, if it was written down or not. And just because it wasn't written down doesn't mean it's not true. We apply, of course, reasoning, and that's what we did here. Anyway, I thought it was really good that he took the time and went through all the different reasonings why he disagreed that giving with the right kind of motivation, and it's still debatable. We just brought it up as something to discuss, whether giving a life with the right kind of motivation is virtuous. And then there was also the discussion about, well, you add another sentient being to samsara. Or on the other hand, they're trapped in the pardo. So it's like, if we don't give birth to someone will be trapped in samsara. So all monks and nuns actually accumulating a lot of non-virtue because we're not having children. So there are all these living beings that we have a potential karmic connection to. They're all trapped in the pardo. So we better have kids. And not just one, many. No, but that, yeah, I can see the reasoning and there's something to it. Like, how does it work? So if I give birth to someone, then I'm responsible for someone being born into samsara. But then again, they will be born anyway. It's not like I don't give birth, so they'll be liberated. Oh, so I'm not going to have kid. So the person who would potentially be my kid, well, they'll be liberated because they've got nowhere else to go. No, they'll be, of course, reborn somewhere else. And so they're not going to be stuck in the pardo just because I decide to become a nun. Yeah, so it's a bit like, it's kind of complicated because you need both. From your own side, a karmic connection to that person. Still working. From your own side, a karmic connection to that person. And from the side of the person, a karmic connection to us. That's a little difficult, this dual kind of, and not dual in a negative way, but that you always need two sides. We usually see just one side. If something happens to us, we blame the other person. But we must have accumulated also the karma for it to happen and meet another person in the case of being killed, for instance. If there's no one to kill us, we won't get killed. If there's no cars, you can't die a car accident if that's the kind of karma you've accumulated, or being stabbed with a knife or whatever. So you always need two. There's this saying, you need two to tango. Well, you need two for karma to ripen. I mean, no, not necessarily, of course, if it's the karma, depends on the karma. But for instance, being killed by someone or being robbed by someone, you need both. To give birth, you need a karmic connection to that person, and the person needs a karmic connection to you. Right? It's like a mutual relationship, a mutual dependence, to use a more Buddhist term. All right, so yeah, that was Vada's point. And so Hans, he added, are you indeed adding a sentient being, or are you providing an opportunity for a sentient being to have a precious rebirth and possibly have the freedoms and opportunities to practice, depending on what your beliefs are, possibly. Or even without that, my parents weren't Buddhist, but at least they gave me the freedom to do what I wanted to do. Okay, there's that. And then there was a question by Neil Schneeberg, I think his name is. He also asked something else. One of his questions I answered, but he said, are the afflictions, and that's an important question, are the afflictions, such as the 6 primary and 20 secondary afflictions, considered acquired or innate afflictions? Or it depends. Is it either of those, acquired or innate? Just to remind you, and this is on page 112 of the material we're going through. We went through it last year. So innate means you're born with these afflictions, something like attachment and anger. You don't have to teach a child to have attachment, to have anger, to have self-centeredness, for instance. We're born with that. But then there are certain afflictions that, based on these innate types, we acquire. We acquire them. Therefore, there's acquired anger. If we've, through, I don't know, the kind of culture we were brought up in, through the religion and so forth, kind of on the basis of our innate anger, generate a new type of anger, then that's an acquired type. Or even clearer, I guess, is, for instance, the view of the self. We have an innate sense, there is this I, there's this sense of a self that is separate from mind and body, that is just more precious than everyone else. And that is then reinforced possibly through, I don't know, science and religion and philosophy and so on. Now that's called acquired. So are all the 6 primary afflictions, what are the 6 primary or prime afflictions? What are they? Anger? Pardon?
Jealousy.
No, it's not part of them. Could be part of them, but in that list, attachment, ignorance. Okay, first 3.
Aversion.
Pardon?
Aversion.
No, that's part of anger. Pardon? Afflictive doubt. Pardon?
Desire.
That's part of attachment. Arrogance. Arrogance. And afflictive views. Afflictive views. So of those 6, 5 are described as non-views. Non-views. They're not specific views. They're not kind of, they're sometimes described as afflictive wisdom. like cognitions, like what is this, how do things exist, and so forth, but just being not in accordance with reality. They are more, I don't want to say emotional, but they're just not what are called views. So they are described, the first 5 of these six primary afflictions are called the 5 non-views. And then you have the 5 views. The last of these 6, called afflictive view, has 5 subdivisions. Does anyone know what they are?
One is the view of the transitory collection.
The first is the view of the transitory collection, exactly, the identity view. Looking at, perceiving of your own, looking at your, or focusing on your 5 aggregates and perceiving there to be an intrinsic I. This is not about looking at someone else's aggregates, but focusing at your own aggregates and perceiving your own intrinsic self. So from everyone's personal perspective, that is the identity view, or the more traditional or the more literal translation of the Tibetan term is the view of the transitory collection. But then you have other ones, extreme views, the extreme view. So the extreme view as in like falling into the extreme of nihilism or reification. Of course, the first type is also an extreme view. Oops. The first one is also an extreme view, of course, but it doesn't matter, they may overlap. But the point is specifically falling into an extreme view where you either deny the existence of phenomena or you reify phenomena, as in like perceiving them to exist more real than they actually do. That is called an extreme view. What else?
Not accepting karma and
A wrong view.
a wrong view. Is that
Wrong view. I mean, you could argue all the other ones are also wrong views, but here in particular, in the first 2, perceiving the non-existence of something that does exist. Again, that could be an extreme view, but it's categorized differently. So, for instance, perceiving the non-existence of karma, believing that my actions don't have consequences, or believing that if I don't know what else, there's no reincarnation, that after this life is over, my mind will go out of existence or whatever. So denying the existence of something that does exist, that is usually described as a wrong view. And then there's something called Dawa Chonzin, believing or holding my own views as supreme, my own wrong views as supreme. So if I have certain wrong views, believing them to be superior, whatever that means, my belief in an intrinsic I and so forth. And again, you see they overlap. They're just seen from a certain perspective. That's view number 4. And number 5 is believing certain incorrect or immoral actions or certain practices, wrong practices to be supreme. So in other words, spiritually in particular, spiritually to believe, for instance, if I don't know, perform animal sacrifices, I will, I don't know, be reborn in heaven or what have you, or be liberated. Okay, so these are the primary afflictions. The prime afflictions, not just from the point of view of the category into 6, but of a category of 10. And now the question is, which of those are innate, which of those are acquired, and which of those are both? Well, first of all, I think you can safely say that whatever is innate necessarily has an acquired version, I would say. Doesn't mean we have to acquire it personally, but it can be acquired. There's a coarser form of that may be developed through our life. But then there are some, they're only acquired. For instance, afflictive doubt, well, it needs to be specified, and it is in this text, but just to say it quickly, there's positive kind of doubt. There's good doubt. Before we come to any kind of conclusion or I'm convinced of something that is actually in accordance with reality, oftentimes that is preceded by a doubt, like, oh, maybe it is, maybe it's not. And that leads us in the right kind of direction. So that's a good kind of doubt. But then there's what's called afflictive doubt, which is a kind of doubt when you can never come to some kind of conclusion. You're never convinced of anything. You constantly doubt, maybe practicing Buddhism, maybe I should practice something else. Maybe I should do this. So you never get to sit down, or I don't know, whatever it is, you never come to some kind of conclusion and therefore can't progress. That is considered to be acquired. And then the view of, I don't remember what I called it. Let me just quickly go back to, because it's difficult to translate it, that kind of wrong view. What is it called? Afflictive doubt. And the second is holding inferior morality and spiritual conduct as superior. That's how I translated this. So that is another wrong view, or another mistaken view, one of the 5 views, to hold inferior morality and spiritual conduct as superior. That is definitely described as acquired. You're not born with that. It's something you acquire. And the question is then, what about the other views? Identity view, or holding myself, like the view of the transitory collection, in other words, perceiving of my own self to exist intrinsically, independently, and so on. That is, it's definitely got both. We're born with it. There's an acquired version as well. Wrong view that I think even a child has this view. Oh, if no one sees me, my actions won't have consequences. If no one catches me, I don't think that's taught necessarily. I mean, you wouldn't have that view maybe when you're 2 or 3. I think there's a certain age when children can't lie yet. I've heard that there's a certain age when children, like they still tell the truth. Did you steal a cookie? Yes, I did. They can't lie yet. And then they discover lies. So I read that somewhere. So, I mean, but that doesn't mean it's not innate. Just because it doesn't manifest right away doesn't mean it's not innate. Okay, yeah. So in answer to this question, therefore, it's debatable. What about the view of perceiving your own ideas as supreme? Are you born with that? Maybe. Because kind of like you learn, certain views from your parents and you believe that to be supreme, because that's the one. I don't think you need someone to tell you this is supreme. But for that, you need to learn. I don't know. I really don't know. If the last one, the holding inferior morality and spiritual conduct, is definitely acquired, then, yeah, well, I mean, this is how I learned it. Maybe there's some disagreement, but I remember my teachers would say this is acquired. So I don't know about the other one. But in answer to Neil's question, yeah, so some have both acquired and innate versions, and some are just acquired. Okay. And then Taruna, she also asked the 4 types of bodhicitta that we talked about. Bodhicitta on the path of accumulation and preparation, bodhicitta on the first 7 grounds, bodhicitta on the last 3 grounds, and bodhicitta in the continuum of a Buddha. Contrived or uncontrived? Anyone? Uncontrived. It's real bodhicitta. It's just bodhicitta in the continuum of a bodhisattva, therefore uncontrived. And it's explained from the point of view of the level on which a bodhisattva is. Okay, so that's Taruna. Oh yeah, and Hella also asked, are afflictive obstructions always innate, or are there also acquired afflictive obstructions? I just answered that. And the last one is, it's Bernd saying tendencies. He has a hard time with tendencies. To him, tendencies seem to be something that don't relate to cause and effect. I don't know what he explains here. In my brain, it's connected to percentages of outcomes in an experiment of chance. I don't understand what that means. But I thought Tomer's reply was really good. Oh, now I lost Tomer's reply. Tomer's reply, where is his reply? There is, yeah. I think he did a great job explaining this. He says it's kind of an inclination more than anything, and therefore it belongs to cause and effect. As in, like, for instance, if this is actually I maybe helpful in terms of just taking anger as an example. So every time I'm angry, I'm leaving imprints. I'm leaving tendencies in my mind. Tendencies to get angry again, or tendencies to get angry for a certain amount of time. And I think this is something we'll notice ourselves if we've been practicing patience, for example, for some time. Okay, we really worked with our anger, we've tried not to get angry, and we succeeded for about a month. Maybe a slight annoyance every now and then, but we could control it. It never gave way to actual aversion and full-blown anger. And then one day we're kind of tired, and before we know, we've been angry for a half an hour. And it's that much easier the next time to get angry, right? So this is called a tendency. In Buddhist terms, it's described as an imprint. Something was left on the mind that now leads to an inclination. This is also how meditation works. So not just talking about anger, we meditate on anger a lot. That's why we get angry, right? So our afflictions, actually, when you use the Tibetan word for meditation, it means to familiarize. Now, of course, you wouldn't use the word meditation in a negative context, like saying I've meditated on anger, as in like I'm more angry than I used to be. But actually, the connotation of the word meditation means to familiarize. So to familiarize with something positive. And every time we meditate on love, for instance, well, right now, if there's no love in our continuum, why can we generate love again a moment later? Because we have the potential for love to arise in our continuum. That is always there. That potential, well, different to anger, the potential for anger to arise is there right now, but it can be totally removed. Oops, reason to get angry. It's okay, thanks. Still working? Yeah. So with anger, that can be removed. So the seed for anger to arise can also be removed. Okay, but love and the seed for love cannot be removed. Simply because, and I'm not talking about attachment love, I love you, don't leave me kind of love. No, I mean the wish for someone to be happy. That kind of love, as is defined in the Buddhist texts. That cannot be removed because it's in accordance with reality. And the seed is always there. The potential to generate it is always there, in other words. So seed means the potential to generate it. But the tendency or the inclination to have love, that depends on how familiar we are with it. Can I easily generate love towards my enemy? No. On a good day, maybe. When I'm generous, whatever. Right? So that's the point. We can generate love, but usually it's limited to how long, towards whom it is directed, how strong it is. Does it make me go out of my way to make that person happy, or do I just have that short moment, oh, may they be happy, all right, I'm busy. Right? So that has to do with the imprints, and that's why we meditate. We try to leave stronger imprints for that love to grow stronger. So these imprints, they are responsible for the quality of our love, our compassion, and so forth. And similarly, when it comes to the afflictions, the quality of the afflictions. But how about when you remove the afflictions? You still have these imprints. The tendencies are still there, but you can no longer get angry. Yet you may still, I don't know, if out of your anger you'd be like speaking to people in a harsh voice, for instance. That tendency is still there. Right? Looking annoyed, for instance, when you're actually not annoyed when something happens. So that is still there, but that's only with anger. And that's nothing to worry about. Who cares? You look serious or whatever. Or in the case of attachment, as Lama Tsongkhapa says, jump around like a monkey, not being able to sit still or something. But that's not the problem. The imprints of our misconception of reality, they are the real problem. because phenomena still appear in a way that is in total contradiction to how they actually exist. It's in a direct opposite. In this case, it's a direct opposite. If it would just be an opposite, not a direct, like an indirect opposite, okay, but it's a direct opposite. Everything appears to exist in and of itself. We're not even aware that it appears that way. It's normal. It appears in a normal way. So when you just look around, when you look at things, they seem to exist over there. Nothing to do with your mind. And whatever you see, everyone else should be seeing as well. That's how it feels. And that is your innate sense that there's this independent, intrinsic world over there. Absolutely independent of your mind. Your mind is just a looking glass into the world. Doesn't it feel that way? It does, doesn't it? Everything is very clear, very precise. This is a table, this is a chair. It's a bit like looking at the pixels of a screen. Everything is clearly, very vividly appearing to my mind. But when I look closer, it's disappearing. When you look closer, it all disappears. And that is true for whatever appears to us. When you look closer, nothing is as clear as before you started looking at things, before you analyze things. What is a chair? Oh, there's a chair, there's a table. Okay, let's not analyze it. It's very clear. There's you, and so forth. But when you start analyzing, it becomes less and less clear. Where's the table within the table? What makes it a table? What makes it a chair? What is the difference between them? On a subatomic level, where does the table start and the chair end? Where does the atoms of my hand start and the atoms of... It seems so clear. This is my hand, this is a table, and I'm touching the table. But what is really touching the table? Is there anything touching at all on a subatomic level? On an atomic level? Seems so clear, but when I go deeper and closer and closer and closer, it's all disappearing. Well, that's because nothing exists intrinsically as concretely and as substantially as it appears to us. And that's why we are suffering. Doesn't seem that bad. Like we could suffer because of that, but yeah. Okay, all right. So Rika writes, aren't karmic connections always from both sides? Can we have a connection to a being and this being has no connection to us? How would that work? That's really good questions. So Rika, is it always from both sides? What do you think? Is it always from both sides?
Yes.
Okay. Anyone disagree? You say yes. Could it be that you're constantly thinking about someone and they don't even know who you are?
Yes.
Taylor Swift? I don't know who's constantly thinking. Or I don't know who else, who's a male singer. Modern one. David Bowie? No, he's still...
It's only in this life they don't know who I am, but previous life we had both connections.
Oh, right. Okay, so he's making a great argument. He's saying, well, in this lifetime, yes, it's just from one side. But in previous life, I mean, we've been connected to everyone. That is true. Because otherwise this whole argument of all sentient beings have been my mother wouldn't hold. I mean, every sentient being has been so close to us. But with the wear and tear through time, wear and tear as in like that connection weakens. So just in this current life, you're absolutely right. Over the period of many, well, countless lifetimes, we can say we've been really, really close to everyone. But just from the point of view of this life, or an immediately preceding life, most recent lives, we have some connections with certain sentient beings and no connection with a lot of others, right? Oftentimes we walk into a room, we see someone and we go, ooh, that person is scary, right? We don't like someone and we don't know why. And we assume everyone else feels the same way, but when we ask, friends or, someone, how do you feel about that person? Oh, they're amazing. What's going on? or love on first sight, you know, like you see someone, you're like, whoa, I'm going to marry that person. Usually I say jokingly, well, there's no love on first sight because you've probably been married to them or you've been with them for many lifetimes. And that would be an example of a mutual relationship. That would be an example of something mutual. But I think if you obsess over, I don't know, a famous person, you're constantly thinking about them, I think you're creating a karmic connection to that person, but they're not creating a karmic connection to you. I don't know. I mean, the power of prayer, which is kind of aspirations, really. May I be born around them. May I be born around them. Maybe you are going to be, I don't know, somewhere in there. But they don't really care about you, but you care about them. I mean, it's just the power of the mind. If you constantly, this is how meditation works. And we meditate all the time, but just in a weird way sometimes. We obsess over certain people. We obsess over career and about ourselves anyway. So we familiarize ourselves with this again and again. And that creates the causes for that to happen. Kind of like be careful what you wish for kind of matter, right? Yeah. Because that's the power of our mind. We're utilizing the power of our mind. Of course, we have to also create the causes and conditions. But accumulating virtue and then having certain wishes, it actually can come true. Not right away. That would be ridiculous. That would be like hoping when you take medicine that you get cured right away, or taking poison you die right away. There are certain poisons you don't die right away. But slowly, you experience the consequences. Could it be that we have a karmic connection on both sides, but it just ripened for one side, Rika asks. We have a karmic connection on both sides, but it just ripened for one side. We have a karmic connection to everyone, really. A weak one. But I'm talking more about the stronger types that actually, give rise to relationships and so forth. Yeah, I don't know. In the end, it's so subtle. This is kind of like our connections. How does that work? I mean, I have a connection to all of you, but some of you have seen for the first time. I've seen you for the first time. Everyone else I've seen before, yeah. But still, so, we could have been best friends in our last life, but now we connect again. Who knows, right? So we may just meet later in life and so forth. Therefore, it's very difficult to say. But that one-sidedness, I think, would be, I mean, we have a connection that goes way back, but in terms of more recent kind of, if this other person that I'm obsessed, that I feel very close to in this life, was famous in their previous life and I was obsessing over them, I probably feel connected to them, but I don't think they have that strong sense towards me. Not at all, probably. Yeah, but I don't know. Okay. Anyway, so those are some of your questions, and I thought they were important to address because they came up as part of our discussions. Okay, now let's go back to the text. What have we been talking about? We've learned that bodhisattvas on the first ground outshine or surpass heroes and solitary realizers from the point of view of merit right from the beginning. Okay, but what about wisdom? So method, on one hand, okay, right from the beginning, bodhisattvas surpass practitioners of the foundational vehicle. But wisdom only happens, the bodhisattvas surpass practitioners of the foundational vehicle only from the 7th ground onwards. And the question that arises is why? Now, we've heard 3 views. The first view by Bhattacharya Lotsawa, by the translator of the text we're studying. He says that on the 7th ground, bodhisattvas start to eliminate cognitive obstructions to enlightenment. And Dhammatsongkhapa says, no way. You only start eliminating them on the 8th ground. So if you assert that, it sounds like you're a follower of the Svatantrika tenet school. And that school has assertions that do not accord with the Prasangika view. So we went into detail on what the Svatantrika asserts. I gave you a chart This will come up again and again. Why? Because what is unique in Chandrakirti's text, he explains emptiness by delineating very clearly the Prasangika view. And what better way to delineate the Prasangika view than by comparing it to the Svatantrika view. Okay? Because in the end, it all comes down to, if you search for a table and you never come to find anything, how can the table exist? Right? If you actually do the meditation, you search for the table and you don't find it, usually we come to the conclusion, then there is no table. That's why the Svatantrika school says you do find something. You find something that distinguishes this table from my hand. But what is it? They don't say. But that's how it feels. That's how it feels from deep within us. We can do the analysis, okay, and then you can't find the self. It's like they say you feel scared. Fear arises. I can't find the self. Are you kidding me? It's been my whole life about something that I can't find. I mean, that is really scary. I've defended this I. I've gratified this I. I've looked after this I like nothing else. I worried about it. I rejoiced in its success. All this time and effort, so much effort. I worked so hard for this I. Really, my I didn't work for anyone more than my own I. And you're telling me it's not there? I've been totally wasting mine. That is scary, isn't it? That is really scary. But when you analyze the I, you can't find it. So then you crave the Svatantrika. The school just below the Prasangika, because they say, oh, you find something. Right? So this is so profound, not being able to find that I. I mean, it's the most liberating thing there is, but before we get to that point, it's scary. And once you understand, well, it's not there, oh my God, nothing to worry about. I'm so free. Don't need to worry if people like this I or not. Don't need to worry about what else? People hurting this I or whatever, it doesn't matter. Successful or not, who cares? Right? Yeah. So therefore, the point is therefore, the Svatantrika school is explained a lot. And we heard already that with please sit in front. Please, tissue. Please, tissue. Please sit there. Mm-hmm. There. Oh, okay. So therefore, with the Svatantrika school, we just talked about it a little bit, but it comes up a lot more. All right. So that was the first view. The second view is about this leaping over, this kind of concentration. Someone said on the seventh ground onward, it was Mapja Lotsawa. His name is Mapja Lotsawa. According to Benji Sonjaba, he said it was someone called Mapja Lotsawa, whose distinction of the Svatantrika and the Prasangika was the basis for Lama Tsongkhapa's writing on the distinction between those two. So that's Mapja Lotsawa. And then the next view was by Shang Lotsawa, probably, another translator, who said that that's on the seventh ground, you're oriented towards the eighth ground. And so Lama Tsongkhapa was like, well, you're oriented towards the eighth ground, on the sixth ground, on the fifth ground. There's nothing special about that. Then another view was mentioned by Acharya Jayananda, an Indian scholar who composed a very important commentary on Acharya Chandrakirti's text. He said, well, from the seventh ground onwards, a bodhisattva doesn't need to study, doesn't need to listen to teachings called signlessness, is not dependent on that, as opposed to those on the lower level. And Lama Tsongkhapa says, well, that's not reason enough to say that their realization, their intelligence, or their wisdom is superior to that of the foundational vehicle, because it should relate to the realization of emptiness. And eventually we found out the reason why bodhisattvas on the 7th ground are superior in terms of their wisdom to hearers and solitary realizers is from the point of view of their direct realization of emptiness being so pliant that they can enter into the meditative equipoise and arise from it within a short moment of time. It's called the shortest moment of time required to complete an action, which is as fast as blinking your eyes or snapping your finger. So they can go in and come out again.
Is that called leaping?
Pardon?
Is that called leaping? Is that called leaping?
Leaping. No, that's not called leaping. That's not called leaping. Leaping was like leaping between different concentrations. That was called leaping. No, this is not called leaping here. It's entering and arising. Entering and arising within the shortest moment of time, or shortest moment of time in terms of the length of time it requires you to complete an action as an ordinary person. Okay. And that pliancy, well, is definitely considered superior. We could question why. Why is that considered to be so superior? To be able to enter into meditative equipoise and arise again? Well, definitely in terms of time. It's convenient. Don't have to meditate for hours on end. You go into a meditative equipoise, you probably are able to overcome some of the innate afflictions and can move on. So just pliancy of mind, of course, being so important. All right, this is where we got to last time. And then the debate starts. Oh, no, there's one little thing that I didn't mention yet. So we got to the beginning of page 143. Last time I forgot to mention the page numbers, but I'm going back to this now. When you look at Lama Tsongkhapa, what he says in his illuminating the intent, he says, on the path where one engages suchness by means of imagination, given then in such a meditative concentration on emptiness, one's mind and suchness have not fused into a single taste, it is not difficult to enter and rise out of such meditative states within short moments. But on the Arya stage, where one's mind has fused with suchness like water poured into water, this mode of entering into and arising out of emptiness within a short moment is extremely difficult. All right, so what does he say? As explained before, on the path of accumulation and preparation, the first two levels of a bodhisattva path, that is prior to becoming an Arya and reaching the path of seeing, practitioners meditate on emptiness through a conceptual realization or imagination. That's the term Geshe Thupten Jinpa uses, Möpa Chöpa, so like he calls it imagination. Since the mind engages emptiness conceptually by way of a generic image, a meaning generality or a generic image, the mind and the object, which is emptiness, have not yet fused into a single taste. So there's a sense from the perspective of the person realizing emptiness that there's a distance between the mind and the object. A sense of distance remains between the awareness and the object emptiness. Consequently, this form of meditation is lighter, it's less intense, it's easier. And entering into and emerging such a state, even within short moments, is not especially difficult. Why? Because our mental consciousness is mostly conceptual. We're used to it. We're used to this distance, the sense of object and mind being distant to each other. By contrast, here what we're talking about is the meditative equipoise, directly realizing emptiness in the continuum of an Arya. So the direct realization, which engages its object without the mediation, without a generic image. So this generic image of emptiness, that is kind of like what emptiness means to us. When you have a mind that perceives emptiness via a generic image, it's that it refers basically to the idea of what emptiness is to us. And through that, we can perceive emptiness. Now, this is difficult when it comes to emptiness because we don't know what emptiness means. But if you take the example of your breakfast this morning. As most of you had breakfast. If you didn't have breakfast, tea or coffee, whatever you had, your first drink, think back of that. The vessel, the cup, the glass, whatever it was in, its color, its shape. Does it appear to your mind? Is it right in front of you? No. Well, say hello to your generic image of your drink in the morning, right? That's what appears to your mind. That's the generic image. So you can take it to mind. You can even have that drink right in front of you, perceive it directly. When you close your eyes, you perceive it still. That shows it is, you can think about this particular object without having it in front of you. In terms of time, it's no longer there, but you can still take it to mind. So you're actually taking to mind this particular drink, but through this generic image. So similarly, when it comes to emptiness, except we haven't seen emptiness before and now remember, that's the difference. That's, well, one difference. In this case, we reflect on emptiness, we go through the different logical reasonings, and eventually come to a sense, oh, this is what emptiness is. But we still have like a generic image of emptiness appearing to our mind. And through this, through the mediation of that generic image, we can get at actual emptiness. But that is not a direct experience yet, which is why once you have come to a conceptual understanding of suchness, of emptiness, you need to familiarize with that again and again and again and again until that generic image slowly disappears. So when it's totally gone, you have a direct experience of emptiness. And that is when you've reached, as a bodhisattva, if you've entered the bodhisattva path right from the beginning, when you realize emptiness for the first time, you've now become an Arya. And your mind now is such that the mind and emptiness are set to merge, like water being poured into water. You're so absorbed into emptiness, like nothing you've ever been absorbed into. I think we have experiences of, I think in English it's called like being in a flow. Are you familiar with that? Like being in the flow, like you're just totally absorbed into, I don't know, what could you be absorbed into? Making momos or no, I'm kidding. Like being absorbed into listening to music or being absorbed into just focusing on your breathing, for instance. I'm sure there are these moments we have, but we're never as absorbed into that object as we would be when realizing emptiness directly. So that's a special kind of absorption that is said to be like that. There's a sense to that mind. The mind is like water and the object is like water, and it's water poured into water. There's no sense of a distance. And because this realization is so profound and absorbed, moving in and out of it within brief moments is extremely difficult. Either you're in or you're not. So kind of entering into it is really difficult. And then once you're into it, to arise from it, apparently it's also really difficult, which is why this is such a huge attainment. Okay. Now everything I've said, you have to question, challenge it. So this is how, usually, traditionally, you study, in particular in this tradition, in the Gelug tradition, and of course this is also encouraged in all the other traditions, to question everything. So we listened to what Lama Tsongkhapa said. We heard these four other views actually, by Patsab Lotsawa, by Mabja Lotsawa, by Shang Lotsawa, and by Acharya Jayananda. Okay, and Lama Tsongkhapa has refuted them one after the other. But now we're wondering, okay, is that right or not? So it's totally healthy. It's encouraged, in fact, to now question this. So if you look at page 144, in this context, the following discussion arises. Why is the criterion for bodhisattvas outshining or surpassing hearers and solitary realizers identified specifically as their ability to enter into and arise from non-dual gnosis or non-dual direct realization of emptiness within the briefest moment of a completed action. Oh, non-dual, by the way, means there's no sense of subject and object being separate. That's what non-duality here, in particular in this context, means. It's also, there's no appearance of the intrinsic existence. There's no appearance of a conventional truth. There's no sense of distance. So it's a non-dual wisdom. But why did Lama Tsongkhapa, and of course based on his teacher's explanation, Rechungpa, by his Jetsun Rechungpa, so I think, yeah, Jetsun Rendawa Shunuludru, as I put in the footnote, he was the main teacher, was Lama Tsongkhapa's main teacher. He was from the Sakya tradition. And if you can read more about him, when he was born, when he passed away. But anyway, Lama Tsongkhapa has specified in his commentary that his explanation on why bodhisattvas on the seventh ground surpass heroes and solitary realizers by way of their wisdom. The reason for that, he specified that comes from his teacher Rechungpa, and that he thinks that's an excellent explanation. But why? So now, what about, for instance, the wisdom newly realizing emptiness in the continuum of bodhisattvas on the path of accumulation? Why is that not superior to that of heroes and solitary realizers? Because it's sustained by great compassion and bodhicitta, right? Remember, sustained, conjoined, or sustained, which means they influence each other. Wisdom is influenced by great compassion, and of course, great compassion in turn is also influenced by wisdom. But when we talk about wisdom here, the conceptual realization of emptiness, when we talk about the conceptual realization of emptiness here, that is sustained by great compassion and bodhicitta. So in terms of what it is sustained by, it's definitely superior to that of heroes and solitary realizers. Likewise, the wisdom of bodhisattvas on the path of accumulation and preparation engages emptiness through a wide range of different reasonings, unlike that of heroes and solitary realizers, right? Unlike that, we had that when we studied during the first term. Lama Tsongkhapa says that bodhisattvas, when they first realize emptiness, so let's say they haven't realized emptiness before entering the path of accumulation, they only realized it afterwards, but they do so on the basis of many, many different reasonings. You don't have to do that to become self-liberated. You can, but you don't have to. So usually heroes and solitary realizers don't apply the same kind of reasoning. And as it's explained in Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary, that's also one of the reasons why their wisdom later on is so much stronger, so strong in fact that it can eliminate cognitive obscurations. While that of heroes and solitary realizers, besides the fact they don't want to eliminate cognitive obscurations because they don't aim for enlightenment, but also don't have that strength. So the wisdom of bodhisattvas on the path of accumulation and preparation engages emptiness through a wide range of different reasonings, unlike that of heroes and solitary realizers. Doesn't it mean that their wisdom is therefore superior because of the wide range of different reasonings that supports their understanding, right? Moreover, as we will come to learn, and it has already been stated at some point in the commentary, that the perfection of wisdom on the sixth ground surpasses that on the preceding grounds. Remember, on each ground, a certain perfection is surpassing, is most excellent. So what about the first ground? What is the perfection of the sixth perfection? Which one is most excellent on the first ground? Generosity. Okay. Yeah, generosity. Second ground, ethics. Third ground, patience. Okay. Sixth ground, wisdom. No, sixth ground, I jumped. I didn't say fourth and fifth, but you're right. Fourth and fifth would be right. So joyous effort. Number 5, concentration. And number 6, wisdom. Wow, that's like on the sixth ground. That's why we're studying the first chapter accords with the first ground. The sixth chapter with the sixth ground. That's why the sixth ground is so extensive. The sixth chapter is so extensive. I think it's 70% of the whole text or something. Anyway, so Therefore, it's stated that the perfection of wisdom on the sixth ground surpasses that on the preceding grounds. These considerations appear to provide alternative basis for asserting superiority in terms of wisdom, even prior to the seventh ground. Wouldn't you agree? 3 reasons given here. Okay? As I said, in terms of what sustains the wisdom, love, compassion, in terms of the causes, the different reasonings, and in terms of its, I don't know, excellence, if you like. Okay. Now, previously I didn't do that. I didn't formulate anything in the debate form, but now I did. So if you want to know how this is debated in English, I just translated it from the Tibetan. Based on the format that people nowadays, when you join a debate class in English, now with Zoom, with online teachings, it's become so much easier. I remember in 2006, I started teaching this kind of class, and I started with a debate. I did it with one of my classmates. We did it together, an American man who was my classmate for 10 years. So we took terms, like we were still studying, so 3 times a week. One day I did a class, the next day he did a class, and we prepared debate. And started to debate with the students in our class, and it worked really nicely. We did this for a few months. It worked really great, except we took a break during monsoon, and then they had gone, and new people came. So it was very difficult to continue because those people who had learned to debate, their visas had finished, or they had to go back to work. They were no longer here. And then the next batch came, and we had to start from scratch. And at some point, I just gave up. It didn't work. But then, with COVID and Zoom, so of course, we all know Zoom basically became popular during COVID, and now it's still popular. So now you still have classes going on. You're in a different part of the world. You could still join. And so there are these debate classes that people join. So I thought, basically, I could also introduce debate to you. So if you want to know what the monks and nuns are saying on not just monks and nuns, also lay people, if they're debating, this would be an example. But of course, this goes on for hours. And just to give you a taste of what it would sound like, the thing is, we learn the structure of the debate to a certain degree, but I think even if you don't, we learn it by doing. But if you just hear it, you'll hear the logic. The format is unusual. It sounds a little weird, but I believe if you read it again and again, this is how I learned it basically. Our teachers didn't explain so much. I mean, explain why you say, I accept, or why, and so forth. But you hear it and you're like, I have no idea what the teacher just said. So it's like, even if you understand it, but for it to sink in, you have to read it again and again and again. So that's basically how I learned it. Or by doing it, of course. So take the subject, the meditative, here's the first debate. Take the subject, the meditative equipoise, directly realizing emptiness on the first 6 grounds of a bodhisattva. It follows that it outshines the meditative equipoise, directly realizing emptiness in the continuums of hearers and solitary realizers. So here, this is arguing against Lama Tsongkhapa. Because he didn't say take the subject, the meditative equipoise, directly realizing emptiness on the 7th ground. Here the person debating, the challenger, is saying no, on all 6 grounds, it surpasses that of hearers and solitary realizers. And in response to that, someone who would agree with Lama Tsongkhapa would say, why? Which is just saying, I disagree. Give me a reason, because I don't agree. If you were to accept, you would say, I accept. And that's it. And then a different argument is started. So you see the round kind of bullet points, that's always the challenger, the empty ones. And the dot, the tiny dot, that's always the answer. I was going to say Q and A and Q, but that's ridiculous. So I chose this format. So you can always see who's the challenger, the one with the, how would you call that? Empty kind of bullet point, and then the little dot. Okay. So anyway, having made that statement, now the person sitting down says why. And now reason is given. Because even the wisdom in the continuum of bodhisattvas who have newly generated bodhicitta and thus just attained the universal path of accumulation outshines the wisdom of hearers and solitary realizers. So, on the path of accumulation, you've got great compassion, you've got love and so forth. Once you realize emptiness, it's sustained by these minds. So not just on the first 6 grounds, even on the path of accumulation, even on the path of preparation. What does the person answering say? The reason is not established. I don't agree with this reason. You have to say that. That's not true, right? Well, no, you could have given another reason. You could give another answer. But for the sake of the argument, they say, no, that's not true. Yeah. The reason is not established. So that on that point, they just attained that outshines the wisdom of hearers and solitary realizers. Not true. Take the subject, the wisdom in the continuum of bodhisattvas on the path of accumulation who have newly generated bodhicitta. It follows that it outshines the wisdom of hearers and solitary realizers because it is cultivated for the benefit of all sentient beings, whereas the wisdom of hearers and solitary realizers is solely for the sake of their own benefit. Okay, the reason makes sense, but there's no pervasion, the person says. No pervasion, which means although it is true, the reason is true, it is cultivated for the benefit. So their wisdom realizing emptiness, conceptual realization of emptiness is done for the benefit of all sentient beings in the case of bodhisattvas, while hearers and solitary realizers don't do it for the benefit of all sentient beings. But that doesn't mean that it outshines the wisdom of hearers and solitary realizers. It doesn't follow from that. Does it make sense? This is the answer they give. So there's no pervasion. The person answering is saying there's no pervasion because although it's true that their realization of emptiness is for all sentient beings, but I don't agree that this is reason enough for the wisdom of bodhisattvas to surpass that of hearers and solitary realizers. Okay. Then the challenger is saying there is a pervasion because this is asserted by Panchen Sontarpa. That's kind of a cheap way out. But, like giving quotes by someone like Panchen Sontarpa, okay, if you are, for instance, if you studied at an institute such as the Institute of Dialectics or Drepung Losang Ling or Ganden Shatse, you accept what Panchen Sontarpa says. But you don't have to. You follow his writings mainly. If you come from a different monastic institution, you may follow someone else's. So here we're not specifying. I didn't just follow Panchen Sontarpa. I also added some views by Jetsun Chökyi Gyaltsen, but just for the sake of debate. So here I chose this format because you have reasoning and you have also quotations that you give as part of a debate. But the other person doesn't have to accept the quotation, of course. It's up to them. Okay. Anyway, so the reason is not established. Someone says no, Panchen Sontarpa does not assert that. It follows that it is established because Panchen Sontarpa states in his commentary on Maitreya's Ornament for Clear Realizations, which is called Decisive Analysis, in the context of this sutra, one might ask, what is the reason it is taught that the wisdom of a bodhisattva outshines the wisdom of hearers, such as the monk Shariputra, who fill the entire world? The wisdoms of hearers, so these hearers who fill the entire world. The reason is that the former, the bodhisattva's wisdom, is not for the sake of one's own benefit alone, but for the sake of all sentient beings, whereas the latter, the hearer's wisdom, is solely for the sake of one's own benefit. Such a bodhisattva is also one who has newly generated bodhicitta. So, this seems contradictory. If you hear this, Panchen Sontarpa said very clearly, because a bodhisattva's wisdom is for the benefit of all sentient beings, while a hearer or solitary realizer doesn't have to generate that kind of motivation, so it outshines that of hearers and solitary realizers. But of course now you can go on now. Now you've got like an argument going. But the other person is more likely to say, no, it's a different kind of surpassing here, or different kind of outshining, or it's a different context. I mean, I don't know. And it's not so much about coming to a conclusion rather than to discuss it. That's the main purpose, to discuss it, to get to know it better, to, hear each other's views and understand the Bodhisattva path better. Because if you discuss it in that way, you get a much better sense of what a Bodhisattva does. You learn from the other person, their views. Your views help the other person to get a better understanding. So the discussion itself is seen as so valuable. And you don't have to come to a conclusion. Unfortunately, we can't ask Lama Tsongkhapa ourselves how he looked at this way. But someone may respond here that the superiority under discussion here in entering the middle way, it says on page 145, if someone responds that the superiority under discussion here in entering the middle way is of a different kind. So it's a different kind of superiority, since it concerns not what sustains the wisdom, but the manner in which that wisdom engages its object, emptiness. You could argue, right? It's just about why you're doing it, but it's got nothing to do with the wisdom itself. It's sustained by great compassion and so forth. It's influenced by that, but it's a mind that realizes emptiness. So just from that perspective, someone could argue. Then a second debate may arise. So again, the challengers say, okay, all right, I can see that. Okay, I'll leave that aside. So this is how a debate works. The other person answers, and at some point you give up. Because if you don't, and you start over and over again, they say the bread has been burned. Palitsiksha. So it's like one of these responses, because it's kind of like you've been turning around and round, like how you make chapatis. You turn them around and round. Yeah, for some time you can turn them around, but if you do it for too long, the bread burns. So yeah, that's one of the ways to kind of react to someone. You have to let it go at some point. To again and again. If you have new arguments, fine. But if you make the same argument again, just with different words, it gets boring. So if then lots of people come together and they follow the debate, they're like making fun of you at some point. So, if you've debated it for some time and you don't get further, you try to find something else. So here the challenger moves on. And this is just
about this argument, how would you defend it?
How would I defend it?
If someone responds superiority in under discussion here, is like a different kind? Like how would a defender state his view?
Well,
just not accept for quotes.
Yes, he would. Okay. He would. I didn't really write it out. You would say there's no pervasion. You would then respond by saying there's no pervasion. So even though you give me this quote, but what Benji Tsongkhapa says here, the kind of superiority he's talking about, is not the same as Lama Tsongkhapa. So he's saying Lama Tsongkhapa talks about a superiority that's from the point of view of wisdom itself, versus the one by Benji Tsongkhapa, he talks about superiority just from the point of view of what sustains it. So they're talking about different things altogether, which you don't know whether they really do that, but that's maybe one view. And it doesn't matter that you're kind of putting words into their mouth. You don't know in the end. But that would be a response. So you say there's no pervasion in response.
It's hard to say, no? Because it says here, but wisdom outshines. And so you have to accept that.
Yeah, but okay.
Wisdom outshines.
Right, it does. Yes, but it's in a different context. It's in a different context. It's in the context of what sustains one over the other. So if Lama Tsongkhapa, he knows that great compassion and so forth sustains or influences the wisdom. He knows that, but he doesn't look at it from the point of view of what sustains it, because it's a different mind, it's compassion and so forth. He looks at it from the point of view of wisdom itself, right? I mean, that would be an argument, because Lama Tsongkhapa knows all this. So why would he still insist? To me, logically makes sense, right?
I always, when I try debating, I always don't manage to hold to such a view. My
when you debate, you never...
My challenger forces me to accept it. Like we say, Sonam Thakpa says, the wisdom of bodhisattvas is outshines the wisdom of solitary birds. Then I have to say accept. Right?
In the beginning, you always say accept, because you haven't learned yet to. This is normal. I mean, in the beginning, when I started, they say lungde shawab. It's kind of like you interpret the quotation. I said the most ridiculous things. That's not a good solution. I made these, first I didn't know you could do that. So when I first started to debate, whenever someone gave a quote, I accepted. Oh my God, Benjamin Sontapa said so. Oh, of course I accept. But then I learned from my classmates or from those in the higher class that we watched during the debate, oh, you don't always have to accept it. You can just be so cheeky and just say, no, Benjamin Sontapa meant something else. And that's like, you really need to it has to make sense, right? So I remember in the beginning, I was like, wow, that gives me so much freedom. I don't have to accept anything. But I didn't realize it was totally ludicrous what I said. It had nothing to do with people just rolled their eyes. So I realized, oh, okay, that freedom doesn't go that far. I need to and it needs to make sense. And here, obviously, there's an apparent contradiction. Lama Tsongkhapa knew exactly that. He knew, of course, because he mentioned it earlier, it's sustained by this and so forth. So he definitely knew that. But he had just a slightly different view. So when you think about it, okay, they use the same words, but it's in a different context. So give me an example of where two people say contradictory things, but they're actually not contradictory, they're just in a different context. For example, in the Kagyu tradition, when we studied a little bit at Sherabling, the monks would say the Buddha's mind is permanent. In this tradition, I've not heard this, maybe it's said in certain, but usually it's like the Buddha's mind is a mind, therefore it's impermanent. So it's contradictory. But it was said in a different context. In the context of the monks, at least at Sherabling, when they talked about, and it's not just Sherabling, but that was where I heard this. So in that context, they said the Buddha's mind is permanent because it doesn't, the qualities of a Buddha do not degenerate. So they use the word permanent in a different context, right? Whereas in this tradition, or I don't know, this tradition means how can I say they don't say ever that the Buddha's mind is, but let's say, according to, for instance, Dharmakirti saying that the mind is impermanent, that the Buddha's mind is impermanent, he definitely says it in the second chapter of the Pramanavartika, the Buddha's mind is impermanent, so it's in a different context. Yeah, so, and therefore you can always see, like, it's in a different context. It means something slightly different. So the same word can mean something different in a different context. And that's what you usually do when you try to interpret these quotes. But initially... Pardon?
Like if I would tell you, Sonam Pakpa said that...
Benjamin Sontapa, yes.
Benjamin Sontapa said that Bodhisattva's wisdom outshines the solitary wisdom, you would say, why? Right?
No. Here in this context, if Benjamin Sontapa were to say to you...
Like if you are defending this view...
If I'm defending...
Someone tells you in the debate...
Yeah. So
Sonam Pakpa says that the Bodhisattva's wisdom outshines...
You say no pervasion.
You say no pervasion.
No pervasion, because actually here in this context, Benjamin Sontapa talks about what sustains the wisdom, while Lama Tsongkhapa doesn't talk about what sustains it. That's what you could say. But again...
No pervasion between him saying that the Bodhisattva's wisdom outshines...
with him saying that doesn't mean that they actually outshine it in this context. Yes, exactly. So no pervasion means even though this quote, I accept this quote, but I don't accept that this quote proves what you're trying to prove. Does that make sense? Okay, great. So you see, it's not difficult to understand. It's a weird language, but if it's in English, you can understand them. Of course, it can go on and on and on, but that's not the point of this class. And usually these debates in books, they're just short. So just to give you a taste. Okay, but if someone responds in the way we just did, so no pervasion. I didn't mention no pervasion here. I could have, but I didn't. Okay, so actually there should be no pervasion. So if someone says no, the superiority under discussion here is of a different kind, because it concerns not what sustains the wisdom, but the manner in which when that wisdom engages its object, the emptiness. Well, then again, take the subject, the wisdom realizing emptiness of bodhisattvas on the path of accumulation and preparation. It follows that it outshines the wisdom realizing emptiness of hearers and solitary realizers. Again, making the same argument. Why? Because it engages emptiness through numerous different reasonings, while the wisdom of hearers and solitary realizers does not. Many different reasonings. First you say a reason is not established. Or you may say that. No, I don't believe that. Okay, the reason is not established. Okay, it follows that it is established. And here again, I just quote Lama Tsongkhapa. Previously, I quoted Benjen Tsongkhapa. And whenever I quote Lama Tsongkhapa from this book, it's of course in bold and italics. Bold and italics. So you can see this is from Lama Tsongkhapa's own text. So I only use bold and italic writing when it's Lama Tsongkhapa. From that you can see. So in the Kindle edition on page 106, it follows that it is established because Lama Tsongkhapa states in his Illuminating the Intent. So I only have the Kindle edition, so that's, if I want to give a page number, I couldn't give you the page number of the actual text. I couldn't give you the page number of the PDF file that's been going around. So that's why I added the Kindle edition. To conclude, Lama Tsongkhapa says, even when a Mahayana practitioner is establishing the lack of true existence of even a single basis, he does so through limitless varieties of reasonings and proofs, like those found in Arya Nagarjuna's Fundamental Wisdom, the text by Arya Nagarjuna. In this way, his intelligence, the intelligence of I don't like to use the word Mahayana practitioner, but Geshe Thupten Jinpa does, so of course I wouldn't change that. So a practitioner of the universal vehicle or the Mahayana, his intelligence comes to be greatly enhanced with respect to suchness. In contrast, the Hinayana practitioner, so the foundational vehicle practitioner, establishes suchness by means of valid cognition, only on the basis of limited reasoning. Yeah, Lama Tsongkhapa says it very clearly. Furthermore, as mentioned earlier, there is a tremendous difference between them. So it's another quote. He says it also on page 72, which is not as explicit. So the more explicit one comes first and the less explicit one comes later. Furthermore, as mentioned earlier, there's a tremendous difference between them in terms of whether during the path of accumulation and path of preparation, and them here from the earlier context, it's clear the bodhisattvas and heroes and solitary realizers, one has enhanced one's intelligence in relation to the truth of the two types of selflessness through employing limitless forms of reasoning. So what are you going to say? No perversion. I have to say. I mean, you would say. Otherwise, we're encouraged to let go of our view if we hit a wall. We're supposed to then say, okay, I give up. As Tomer said, he sometimes just gives up, which is good. In the beginning, you don't know how else to do it. But then we're encouraged not to give up that easily and try to find a way around it. Now, it can get a little extreme. I've had times when I really didn't give up and it was really stupid. Many times. But I was like, I'm not going to give up my views. But that's silly. So I was silly many times, because sometimes I was like, okay, maybe I find a way around it. But then when you really, like, you're trapped in a corner, you give up. You say, okay, all right. So in this case, again, it's obvious that Lama Tsongkhapa meant something different because he seems to be contradicting himself. And again, you would say something, and I didn't mention this here. You would say something like, no, but it's not about the causes, because the reasoning is the cause for the realization, right? Does that make sense? The different types of reasoning, they are the causes of the realization. Why do you need reasoning? You need reasoning as a means to understand emptiness. Does that make sense? So you realize emptiness through. The word through implies here that the reasoning is the causes for the realization of emptiness. When we study the Dharma, we learn right from the beginning to understand, are two things related as cause and effect? You learn that very quickly. It's always very important. Now, the realization of emptiness, what does it depend on? It depends on reasoning. First, we don't understand emptiness. So in order to understand emptiness, we need different reasonings. Again and again, we reflect on it. And as a result of this reflection on reasoning, we come to realize emptiness. Does that make sense? So the reasoning is the cause. And of course, even more important, the reflection on that reasoning. So first someone presents a reasoning to you, and then you reflect on it. As I said last time, it's not enough to say, oh, the self, take the subject, the self, it doesn't exist intrinsically because the Buddha said so. It's not going to take you anywhere. It's not a correct reason in the first place. It's not a correct reason. But besides that, it's not going to take you anywhere. Yeah, the Buddha said so, so what? Right? I mean, so what? I'm not saying with all my respect. I mean, I'm very, I'm with great respect. Of course, the Buddha said so, but it doesn't help me. But just the Buddha saying so. So I need to understand the reasoning. So that would never be a reason. The self doesn't exist intrinsically because the Buddha said so. That's not a correct reason. What would be a correct reason? Because the self doesn't exist as in one with the aggregates or as inherently separate from the aggregates, or the self exists, is interdependent, is merely labeled, or the self exists as a dependently risen phenomenon. Those would be reasonings, and there's so many reasons you can give. Changes moment by moment, for instance. You can give that as a reason, that it changes constantly. So how can it exist intrinsically? So many different reasons, and you reflect on them, and not just listening to, okay, I understood. No, we need to really internalize it. But by applying all these different reasons, at some point you realize emptiness, they say, right? So you realize it. Okay, so once you've realized it, those reasonings, well, they may still help you to deepen your understanding, but for your first realization, those reasonings, those previous reasonings that you depended on were the cause. And here you could say, Lama Tsongkhapa is not talking about what sustains the wisdom. He doesn't talk about here what caused this wisdom. He talks about this wisdom itself. That would be valid, wouldn't it? It makes sense, doesn't it? Saying the wisdom itself, arising, entering into it and arising from it. Here you're not talking about what sustains it. You're not talking about the causes and condition. You talk about applying that wisdom itself. Yeah. But I didn't say no pervasion, etc. But then the next one, furthermore, and this one I find is more difficult to answer. Furthermore, take the subject, the meditative equipoise, directly realizing emptiness on the sixth ground. Remember, when the wisdom, the perfection of wisdom is most excellent, it follows that it outshines the meditative equipoise of hearers and solitary realizers, because on the sixth ground, the perfection of wisdom, it has become most excellent. No, that's a typo. Because on the sixth ground, the perfection of wisdom, please cross out it. Because on the sixth ground, the perfection of wisdom has become most excellent. I could have said it grammatically, or in terms of the English, it sounds better, but you could get confused what is meant with it. So sometimes in the debate, you may just repeat it once too many times just to be sure the person understands. So here, the sixth ground, the perfection of wisdom, has become most excellent. Okay. The reason it's not established, first you want to hear the proof for that, why it becomes most excellent. So then on page 146, the debate continues. Take the subject, the meditative equipoise, directly realizing emptiness. So you repeat it again. It's very important, because when you debate, it's difficult to hold. And that's what's so beautiful about the debate. You learn to hold it. But let's face it, you're not in the most quiet place you could be. Everyone is screaming around you. That's one of the reasons why debate is so great. I mean, it has so many advantages. Emotional control. Emotional control. You know, the other person is pounding at you and you know you're in the wrong, and like, you have to control yourself. If you don't control yourself, you can't think. You have to keep calm, right? No, any kind of excitement, anger is not going to work. You have to really control your emotions. Secondly, you have to hold the argument in your mind. Initially, you can't write it down. So it's like, what? Like, as the challenger, you have to remember what the other person said to be able at some point, when they don't expect it, to get back at you, right? It's kind of like when you play chess, and that little, that kind of tiny movement of the, whatever you call it, I don't even know what, pawn of the pawn, right? Kind of you ignored that, but later when you come back to that, the other person has totally left that pawn in front of their queen or whatever, totally exposed, but they've forgotten about it. It's a bit like that. You're playing chess with your mind, except you have to have these chess pieces right, in your memory. What did the other person say? To then eventually go back to, but you learn that. That's fascinating. You actually do. You do it all the time. No way you forget. You don't. It's automatically it stays with you. It's like it's so much fun. It's like, wow, he just made the mistake. I'm gonna get this past. you remember, and it's so much fun, right? It's like, yeah, so satisfying, but not in a nasty way. I mean, as long as there's emotion control, of course, right? Yeah, it's really a lot of fun. So anyway, you learn all that, and you have this focus, but it's sometimes easier. You just repeat it again for yourself and for the other person. So it seems a little repetitive saying it over and over again, but it helps to keep the argument. Yeah, it's an incredible technique. I mean, amazing. I think the Tibetans have refined it. For instance, in India, I've been told, our teacher used to always explain that they will sit opposite to each other and just snap their fingers. But in Tibet, you probably freeze to the ground if you both be sitting the whole time. So one person's got up and started moving. So at least one person kept reasonably warm, and then you switched places. I don't know what that has to do with but it's actually more fun to move around and bring your movement into the argument. And it also helps. You want to make a point, you move faster and it comes out of your mouth faster. So anyway, having said this, so this explains why it's kind of repetitive. Take the subject, the meditative equipoise, directly. So I'll just finish this argument and then we have questions. Take the subject, the meditative equipoise. That's page 146. The meditative equipoise, directly realizing emptiness on the sixth ground, it has become most excellent because among the six, I already said that. Among the six perfections, superiority is reached progressively by ground. Oh no, I haven't said that yet. Sorry. Now is the explanation, first of all, why the perfection of wisdom has become most excellent. So before citing a quotation, there's reasoning. Take the subject, the meditative equipoise, directly realizing emptiness on the sixth ground, it has become most excellent because among the six perfections, superiority is reached progressively by ground. Generosity on the first, morality on the second, and so forth. Culminating on the sixth ground in superiority in the perfection of wisdom. Right? That's the reasoning, saying, okay, on each ground it's more excellent. The reason is not established. It follows that the reason is established because this is asserted by Lama Tsongkhapa. And then there's a typo. Then it should be the reason is not established again. So I changed that. You have the little dot and then again the round hollow dot. It follows that the reason is established because Lama Tsongkhapa. So I left something out. The reason is not established once I left it out. And so I corrected it in my version. I'm going to give you the next few pages soon, probably over the weekend. And then you have the corrected version of the handout. I'll have to give it to you probably up to 156. Yeah, this far I can give you. Plus a chart. The second chart is coming. Okay, so the reason is not established. It follows that the reason is established because this is asserted by Lama Tsongkhapa. The reason is not established that this is asserted by him. While it is, the reason is established. It follows that the reason is established because Lama Tsongkhapa states in his Illuminating the Intent, prior to this, such as on the fifth ground, the Bodhisattva did not attain such cessation, for he has not reached superiority in the excellent perfection of wisdom. And then again, so here on the sixth ground, the perfection of wisdom comes to be most excellent. There he says it. So Lama Tsongkhapa himself said this. Okay, so then you need to decide how your answer, but this one is difficult. Here's about talking about the perfection of wisdom itself. It's not about its causes, it's not what sustains it. Very difficult to answer. And still Lama Tsongkhapa, and he knows all this. So he must have a reason. But you see how all this gives you the opportunity to think about it in a very different way. If you had just just read it, okay, what's next? But you never go into more detail, and you gain so much understanding of so many other aspects. And with this constant debating, this reflection, you also come to understand how it's all connected, how everything is connected to everything else. And that gives you a much better sense of how everything fits into everything else. All right, so this was just a tiny bit, and I continue from now on. Whenever I find there is a debate, I mean, sometimes there are debates that are too abstract or not that helpful. It has to be something that you can relate to. This you can absolutely relate to. But the main debates are always mentioned. Okay.
I just want to go back to that question about karma.
Yes,
Is it
please.
2 ways or 1 way?
Right.
You were saying, like, you used an example of Taylor Swift.
Pardon?
You're using an example of
Taylor Swift,
Like,
okay.
I idolize Taylor Swift. I'm thinking about her all the time. I'm like,
Obsessing over, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm bringing attention and awareness to Taylor Swift.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm actually like, I'm bringing awareness to her. So she, even though she doesn't know me, she will still feel that connection. She'll still kind of get something from that attention that I'm giving her. And almost like the attention brings energy and brings energy towards her. And then karmically, then that kind of helps her, whatever she wants to do. She might feel like, great, one day, because I'm bringing some attention to her, like metta. When you're doing metta, we're like done for our loved ones, our family.
Okay, all right. So let me repeat the argument, right? So, what's your name?
Great.
Craig. So, Craigslist Craig? Is it the Craigslist Craig? The same spelling? Craigslist? The Craigslist? Craigslist?
C-R-A-I-G.
Oh, yes, Craig. Okay, so Craig is saying, well, I gave the example of, we have this whole question about, do you have is a karmic connection always mutual or not? So in this context, I said, well, what about if you obsess over someone like, I don't know, Taylor Swift? Taylor Swift doesn't know you, but you're thinking about her constantly. Doesn't that create a karmic connection from your side with Taylor Swift, but not the other way around? But Craig is arguing, well, actually, when you think about her all the time, so probably with positive thoughts if you're a fan, so that will support her, that kind of metta. I wonder if it's always metta, like may you be happy or may you look at me? That's the question, right? Just bringing your attention to her. Okay, bringing attention to her. That will help her to succeed. So if all the Buddhas pay attention to me all the time, I should be really successful. Because not just an ordinary person, there are countless Buddhas, right? It says in the text, there are countless Buddhas, there are countless Bodhisattvas. So, Buddha in particular can think of takes to mind every single sentient being. So including myself, I'm getting the support of countless Buddhas. I should be much more successful, right? Actually, like in terms of practice, for instance. So I'm not sure this is really true because we're just ordinary people. Unless Taylor Swift created the causes and conditions, I think that's difficult because I've got all the Buddhas behind me and I'm still trapped in cyclic existence. They want me to be successful, realizing emptiness and all that. It's not happening.
I know, I understand what you're saying, but we do get support.
And my other question is, sorry, just a question. Yeah. There's another point. How about if you don't like someone?
Yeah.
You could argue, okay, it takes some time for these politicians that we don't like, and but is that really what's happening? Because everyone dislikes them. So it's one day they die. Oh, we killed him. We killed her. No, they died. I mean, I don't know. You're right that our thoughts matter. I do think that because if our thoughts didn't matter, for instance, doing pujas, for instance, for someone, doing prayers for someone, it's not just the words, it's also the intention of the person and so forth. It definitely can help. But if it's not the karma of the person to be helped, it'll be difficult. So this is very, very complicated. It can, but it doesn't have to. Yeah. Sorry, you wanted to?
Yeah, like so. Say for example, say you get initiated into something like Kriya Yoga or Buddha, and you get support. You feel energetically held, and then that helps you in your everyday life. You know, so it can be the opposite. If somebody's feeling negative towards you, and you're sensitive, you will feel this this, and that can affect your day. So
if you're open to that,
I don't think it's. That's why I don't think it's one sided, because we're all connected, as we were saying. So a karmic connection can't be just one way, because it has to go somewhere. Like the energy has to go somewhere. It can't just dissipate. You know.
Okay, so you are okay with the empowerment that you're mentioning. Well, that is like you're open to that. You're actually you're intentionally opening yourself. I mean, that's part of the ritual. Like you have to be even there in person. It's said like online. Okay, His Holiness is given an empowerment online, but that's because His Holiness has that power and ability to decide that. But usually it's not given online. Rather, most other lamas would do it for you in person. So to be there present, to be open and receive what they call the inspiration or the blessing of the particular deity. So in that case, you are open to it, and that is actually a mutual thing. Something is coming and you're receiving it. But if someone really doesn't like you and sends you all these negative thoughts and you go, I just couldn't care less, I wonder if it really affects you. I mean, if I don't know, but there's so much on the subtler level we really can't tell. So it's possible. I mean, how would black magic, but black magic works for some and not for everyone. I mean, black magic is just the opposite as white magic that you find in this tradition, right? Yeah, I don't know. I really don't know. I think it's too subtle but I'm not saying that's impossible, but I'm wondering whether there's a pervasion in the sense of like, is that always the case? That is what I'm doubting. It's possible that in the case of Taylor Swift, she's open to that kind of support and she does, but it's not necessarily the case. I would just argue against that it's always like that. I mean, even if it's 90%, whatever, but I don't believe it's always like that. That would be my argument, but I don't know. Let me just check what they say. But great, no, Craig, great. No, great, well done. This is great. This is actually, it's something else to think about. Very good argument. Right, B. So let me see. There's only 2 questions in the group so far. Since I do not yet have direct perception of emptiness, how accurate is the meaning generality of emptiness that my conceptual mind generates, such that this meaning generality can be used to get to a direct perception? Yeah, that's a good point. Is my meaning generality, or is her meaning generality actually the meaning generality of emptiness or of something else? That's the thing. We've been talking so far the meaning generality of my breakfast. It's not the meaning generality of my afternoon tea. No, it's the meaning generality of my breakfast. Because if what appears to you is the meaning generality of your afternoon tea, you're not thinking about your breakfast. Similarly, if you misunderstand emptiness, if we misunderstand emptiness, which is very easily done, that's why we learn so much about it, because the middle way is so subtle. It's so easy to fall into one of the 2 extremes. So therefore, if I don't understand it, if I negate a little too much or a little bit too little, then my meaning generality is the meaning generality of nothingness or the meaning generality of inherent existence, but not of emptiness. So once the meaning generality, based on B's question, if the meaning generality is of emptiness, then she's fine. Once the meaning generality is of emptiness, at least your conceptual mind has identified the object of negation. Right? The object of negation has identified. Yes, you could say, as in like, if it's inherent existence, and now you take to mind that doesn't exist. Or intrinsic existence. You take to mind that doesn't exist. You do so via the meaning generality of emptiness, of actual emptiness. So first you need to identify what it is to be negated, right? Just with the correct assumption, okay, so this is what is to be negated, and then you have to negate it. Now, negating it with a valid cognition means you realize emptiness. Negating it just with a correct assumption means, right, saying that doesn't exist, it can't exist. First, you need to know what doesn't exist. So, for instance, the self. If it, hypothetically, if it were to exist, if it intrinsic existence existed, that's what it would be like. Okay, so this is the object that I need to negate. First, you come to that conclusion. Just, it doesn't have, it's not a realization yet, it's just a correct assumption, you're convinced. The next step is to negate it. But you can do so first being convinced that this doesn't exist. So then the meaning generality is already of emptiness, if you've negated enough, or if your object of negation is correct. And then once you have a correct assumption, then you realize it conceptually. But in all those times, your generic image has to be of emptiness. And how do you know? Very difficult to ask someone, right? I mean, actually, yes. That's what, like, for us, I mean, realizing emptiness is really difficult. But let's think of someone who's like an incredible practitioner, who's really, I mean, we can realize emptiness, but we're so busy with lots of other things. If we will really focus on it, be like a determined practitioner, then they say, like, these advanced practitioners, they go to see their teachers, and they're usually teachers, they're lamas who have presumably realized emptiness. Yeah, they have. I think you can safely assume they go to their lama and they describe it, and then the teacher from their description would know. But I guess you would also know to a certain degree, because it changes things so profoundly, right? I mean, it changes things so profoundly, even just the conceptual understanding. I think you will get a good sense. I don't think you'd be like totally, I mean, sometimes people, if I translate it in the past, so sometimes people would come up and say, oh, I did a course in Tushita or two, and I meditated. Have I realized emptiness? I saw that light. Sorry. I almost chuckle, it's like, I saw this light, or everything was black, or I didn't think of anything. I mean, that's too easy. It's like, whatever that was, and if you dig deeper, it's like, was there any change? No, it was just nothingness. So it wasn't emptiness, and it's not that easy. Well, for some it may be easy if in their previous life they've done all the practice, so it doesn't take long to reconnect to what they've realized in their past life. But, for most of us, in my case, like, no way, it's going to take forever. I mean, not forever, but it's going to take a really long time. And so just sitting down to meditate once or twice is not going to do it. So unfortunately, it is really difficult, but we can know it's difficult. Why would the Tibetans spend so much time on this text? And then in preparation on this, the Tibetans have been really successful to preserve the Dharma for more than 1,000 years. Incredible. Preserved everything, and these incredible lamas. Well, if you at the Nigalic tradition, all the lamas who realized emptiness, they've definitely studied this, learned about this. Well, not all. In some lifetime, definitely. Maybe not in this lifetime, they're new to it. But yeah, mainly if they've done the formal studies, they've done this, and again and again and again. Why? Because it takes so much time. Not because it's difficult in and of itself. No. It's only difficult because of our ignorance that holds on for dear life. And every moment we perceive things, the opposite appears. Yeah, so anyway, sorry.
Can I ask about what you said now? Something?
Pardon?
Can I ask about what you said now?
Yes, please.
You said that if we would realize it, we would know. Like, if we would get the correct object of emptiness in meditation, we would know it. But then I would ask...
I'm not sure you would know.
Like if
I think there's a change. I don't know.
Let's say we would have like a doubting mind, not a conceptual realization, and not even a doubt leading to, but like, let's say, a neutral doubt. And like, we meditate, we would have a correct object, but with a neutral doubt. Would we still have an effect in our life? Like, would we see something? Like, would it really change something? Because I assume if the first
Let's
time
not
we see it,
forget that
we would
realizing
doubt.
emptiness, sorry to interrupt you, that's not, so you're saying like if we just have correct doubt, if we have correct doubt, would that, in terms of emptiness, so it's not yet conviction, but we have taken mind to emptiness with a doubt tending towards the fact, so a correct type of
Or
doubt.
neutral doubt.
Neutral doubt, or neutral doubt.
At the beginning,
Would-
we meditate and we're not so convinced by the reasoning. Like we
Right, we would be so convinced.
Not one, not different, but then,
Yeah.
is it like this? Not 100% sure.
Does it have a profound effect on our love? I don't know. I don't really don't know whether it does. When you're convinced, it probably does. When you're convinced, it probably does have an effect. But just doubt, I'm not sure. I don't know. But when you're convinced, I mean, let's not forget, you have to also realize, as Lama Tsongkhapa says in the 3 principal aspects of the path, that the lack of intrinsic existence and dependent origination, that there's no contradiction, in fact that they support each other. So that understanding, like Geshe Thupten Besang, one great meditator, he's once said, yeah, so just not being able to find something, probably just the non-findability, no, that doesn't account for emptiness. So first you need to then, after that non-findability, get a sense that phenomena still exist interdependent. So he would therefore probably say that non-findability is not emptiness yet, and you need to combine it with this understanding of dependent origination, and then go back. And if there's no sense of contradiction, then it works. Yeah, I don't know. I tell you when I get there, I have no idea. And maybe it's also different for every person. I mean, it's probably the experience may be different. I really can't tell. But I would be surprised if there isn't a huge sense of relief. That I. That's my controlling, I mean, it's not the I that's controlling me, it's this mind that believes there to be this I that's constantly, I mean, that it would get rid of, that hold of it would probably be weakened, would be undermined. I wouldn't be surprised, even with a conceptual mind. But I don't know. Anyway, let's just do it and find out the best way to, okay. In other words, how can I, all right, Vardha says, if there's no need for numbering a text, I can do it in PDF and send you the numbered file in PDF. What does that mean? When I give the quote, all right, okay. If there is a need for numbering a text, I can do it in PDF and send you. Okay, great, sure. That would be helpful, Vardha, thank you. B saying, in other words, how can I have a meaning generality of something I do not know? Yeah, first you need to know. First you need to identify the object of negation, right? What is it to be negated? And then negate it. That's important. That's why, of course, Shantideva, Acharya Shantideva says, before you understand the object of, I'm paraphrasing him. So before you can negate the object of negation, you need to identify it. That's the first step. Yeah, connection means that there's need to be at least 2 things to be connected to. Well, that is true. Connected means that there need to be, I'm connected to Taylor Swift. Okay, I agree. So there need to be at least 2 things to be connected to. Yeah, you can't connect something, there's nothing else. So there's always 2 things. But I'm wondering whether from the other person's side, there's that connection. So if we apply this to 2 beings, this connection must influence both sides. Question mark. The question is, if I just think of someone, does this automatically count as a connection? As you just said, metta, etc., don't automatically reach the other person. Yeah, that's what I'm wondering. It helps me. As His Holiness the Dalai Lama always says, we think anger harms the other person and compassion benefits the other person, right? So there's this really clever saying, anger is like eating poison and hoping for the other person to die. Right? They say that someone said I've read it online that it was from the Buddha. I don't think it's by the Buddha. There's a different quote from the Buddha that anger is like holding burning embers, trying to throw them at the other person, but you burn yourself before you can actually throw it. But I like that saying. Anger is like eating poison and expecting the other person to die. It's not going to happen. You just harm yourself. And so does compassion. We believe it benefits the other person, but only if we act out of this compassion. It benefits us in the most profound way. And this is why His Holiness usually says, if we're selfish, we should be wisely selfish. Let's generate compassion, right? Cause and effect is a connection of two things which does not influence in both directions. Bernd says, okay. Oh yeah, so cause and effect, yeah, that is also true. Cause and effect is like, of course, the effect doesn't influence the cause back. It influences something else that then becomes the effect of that. Okay. So actually first have a meaning generality of the object of negation, not of emptiness. Yes, 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 B. First you need to have a meaning generality of the object of negation. Very, very important point. Yeah, that's true. Okay, great. Let's leave it at that. B, sorry. You can stop typing. No, you can add it. Never mind. I can see she's typing, but you can add it and we can... Oh, she's already written. Yeah, okay. But I'll do it next time because time is up. Let's take a moment, of course, again, to not let go, let the whatever positive potential we've accumulated go to waste, but rather let's direct it through the power of our mind towards our own awakening, not just for our own benefit, but for the benefit of all sentient beings. In this snow-encircled land, you are the source of benefit and bliss. Avalokiteshvara Denzin Gyatso, please remain in life until samsara ends. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore. May the precious view of emptiness, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore. Thank you very much.